All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. I am Jack Allen. Thanks for joining us on our Bible Study Friday with my boy Brandon. Today is Revelations Part 3. I'm excited. Brandon, how the hell are you?
Man, I'm doing great. Doing great. Thanks
Nice,
for
dude.
thanks for having me for part three.
I love it. I love it, dude. This is like the Cliff Notes version of reading the Bible. Though I always say I need to start reading, but you're my biggest teacher so far, so I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Yeah, man, last episode trying to get through the letters to the seven churches can be a little rough,
No, dude, it was great.
because it doesn't, you like get this awesome intro and then you get a few chapters and you're like, why are we even looking at this? Like, I want to get to the cool stuff. Like, tell me about the dragons and like the Battle of Armageddon. Like, I'm not worried about these letters. So yeah.
No, dude, you're doing it perfectly. So first, I know I want to get. So we finished the letters last time. We
Yeah.
talked about tell us what the cliff notes of what we talked about the first two, just in case someone didn't see it or whatever.
Yeah. So the super cliff notes is like John's on an island by himself, and Jesus appears to him and tells him to pretty much write down everything that he sees. So he gets tasked with like writing. I always say writing the things that are, the things that he like the things before these, which is chapter 1, and then 2 and 3, the letters to the churches, which when you reflect that back to the book of Daniel in the Old Testament, you understand the age of the Gentiles and that we're living in the last letter to the churches there. And then, you start with chapter 4 and 5 kind of set up chapter 6 and the rest of it, which jumps into the prophecy part of the end times and things like that. So it's really not until you get into chapter 6 that you get a lot of that stuff. So we ended with the letters in chapter 3 and ready to jump into the prophecy stuff, the cool stuff, as everybody
All
says.
right,
Yeah.
dude. Prophecies. All right, so start us off. So yeah, you know where to start. You're you got it all planned.
I hope so. So chapter 4 and 5, they really set up chapters, 6 through 19, and that is the tribulation period. So the book of Daniel, we learn that tribulation is this 7-year period that is meant for the nation of Israel as their last 77. And so it's a 7-year period, tribulation is, and it's really broken into two different parts. So you have the first half of it that's 3.5 years, and then you have this moment between them that's called mid-tribulation. But there's a lot of stuff, like there's 4 chapters in Revelation that are dedicated to this moment that separates these two 3.5 year periods.
Wow.
And then you have the remaining 3.5 year period after that. And so really for like chapters 4 and 5, John is taken into the throne room and he gets to see a lot of this cool stuff. One of the things that he sees are these 24 elders that are in there. And for us, that is like, that's a really like evidence for us in showing that we get raptured at some point, because elders are always depicted as human beings in the Bible. And it says that there's 24 of them. And obviously throughout church history, there's been more than 24 elders in the church.
Yeah.
And so in like previous episodes, we talked about the number 7 representing 100%. So you would think that you would see like 7 elders in there to represent everything.
Yeah.
But biblically, the number 12 represents government or leadership. So like the 12 tribes of Israel, like you had the 12 tribes that governed all of Israel.
Right.
You had the 12 disciples that were with Jesus. We have 12 months that govern our whole year. So that number 12 really represents that. And when you double a number, It really just means to like emphasize it or make the concept behind that complete. So 12 doubled is 24. So that's why you see the 24 elders, or why John saw the 24 elders in there and wrote about them.
That's crazy, dude. How you like these numbers, I don't know if it's like gematria but how it has even this much influence, like, meaning in the Bible. It's just why it's not, I don't know. It's just something interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like we've talked before, and we'll talk about a little bit again tonight about the number 6 representing the number of fallen man, and Christ is on the cross for 6 hours, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So again, like you see, like you get this representation and this symbolism of what that means, and I guess for me as a believer, like seeing that intentionality and the meaning behind all of that, it just furthers to let you know that it is part of the plan. Like it wasn't by mistake or by accident or anything like that.
Yeah.
So there's a like before tribulation starts and just more evidence that
and what's tribulation? Sorry.
Yeah. Tribulation is just this, it's the 7-year period of events that happen on earth. It's the last 7 of the 77s that the book of Daniel talks about. And that is for like the punishment of Israel for entering into a covenant with God. And then they pretty much broke that covenant.
Okay.
So they like willingly said, yeah, hey, we're cool to go into this. And then, they broke the covenant. And so they had to have, they had consequences for that, which last time we talked about the age of the Gentiles, which is good for us because I'm not Jewish and I don't think you're Jewish either. So had they not done that, then it wouldn't have opened the door for Gentile people like us to be able to receive the message, to be able to spend, eternity with God. So, that's really great news for us that they didn't do any of that stuff. There's a part in First Thessalonians where it talks about us being caught up. And what's really cool is that phrase that Paul uses in that book, caught up. If you translate, like the literal translation in Latin Vulgate, is the term is raptura, which becomes rapture in French. And that's the term that we use now. It's saying like we'll be raptured. So when we die, because God had put a curse on the ground and our bodies from the ground. So, we're two things. We're a body and we're a soul or a spirit. So our body just stays here and angels escort our souls into the throne room. But if you're here at this moment of rapture, then you're just immediately taken into the throne room. And I guess the ironic part in like the Jewish people not believing that Jesus was the Messiah, but when you look at the festivals and traditions that they have now, so the rapture is this picture of this feast, and it fits between the Feast of Pentecost, which we know Pentecost was when the disciples received the Holy Spirit. And on the other side of that is the feast, the Yom Kippur, which is a picture of the second kingdom. And so this Feast of Trumpets fits in between the two of those, which would be the rapture. So even for like Jewish festivities and history that they do, like the rapture is still there between, the Pentecost and for the second kingdom coming. So I always find that a little ironic, I guess you could say.
And the throne room's like in heaven. That's what, when you say throne room.
Yeah. So that's the throne room. Throne room is in heaven. And so John is in there and like he's seeing all this stuff. Chapter 4 is giving like this depiction of everybody that's in there, and that's how we can know that either you've been raptured or like you've died and your soul is there. And then
so rapture is a good thing. If I was raptured, right? Or no?
Yeah. So it's like there's this trumpet which is a like military order, is how that's described. And Christ doesn't come all the way to the earth. Like he comes down in a cloud kind of halfway. And if you're still alive and you're a believer, then your soul is immediately just escorted into the throne room.
Wow. There's going to be a long line in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So we joke. So the church that we go to, we always do an Easter service off campus somewhere. And like they were talking about, making sure that from a communication and marketing standpoint that we let people know what had happened. I joked and said we could just put like a note on the door that just says, if you're reading this, the rapture has happened and you should be worried if you're still here. My idea did not get.
They didn't find it funny.
Yeah,
I think it's funny. So
I thought it would have been hilarious for people to see that.
So they're in the throne. So Jesus comes down halfway. I don't mean to keep interrupting you.
No, you're good. You're good. So chapter 5, is focused on, like, it starts off and it's focused on God the Father holding, it says like a book, but like when you translate that, it's a scroll, and you wonder what this scroll is. It says that nobody is worthy to open this scroll, but that there's writing on the front and the back of it. And that's a clue as to like how we can know what this scroll is. So back then, like only certain legal documents would have had writing on both sides of them. One of the documents that would have done that would have been a land deed. And so when land was sold or awarded in Israel, a deed was drawn up describing like what those terms would have been. And then like some of the details would have been written on the outside of that, because like, let's say it was between me and you had deeded me some land for a certain period of time, but then maybe a couple of years from now, we both forgot what it was. Well, if a magistrate opens up the scroll to read what the details are, then that like signifies that that is done. So if you had deeded me land for, let's say, 10 years, but 4 years in, we both forgot what was happening and a magistrate opened it up, then that ends our agreement. We would have to make a new agreement.
Wow. Okay.
From that standpoint.
Got it.
And we learn that this scroll, it has 7 seals on it. So again, we go back to what the number 7 means, being like 100% or complete or whatever. So this thing is completely sealed. And you would think, being in the throne room where God is, for it to say that, nobody was found worthy to open this scroll. The term worthy, it doesn't mean good enough. It actually means appropriate.
Okay.
So then when it talks about Jesus coming forward to be able to open the scroll, you have to think about, this is a land deed between Israel and God. So who's the one person that could step in kind of with an unbiased opinion to be able to represent both mankind and represent God? Well, Jesus is God, but he also took on human form when he came to earth as Jesus. So he's like the person that can like step in and be this moderator between the two of them. And he even says that he overcame the world, meaning that he defeated the ruler of this world, which is Satan, and he did that by his death and resurrection, because that's Satan's only weapon against us is death. And Christ is the one that came, he died, and he was dead for 3 days, because that was their tradition. You had to be dead for 3 days, because they would start like wrapping somebody up 2 days later, and all of a sudden they pop up and it's like, oh, you weren't really dead, you were just like kind of dead. So 3 days was like their deal. Yeah. So, Jesus dies on a Thursday, and he's put in the tomb before the sun goes down, and then he's there. And then when the ladies come back to finish the embalming process, because they didn't have time to do that on Sunday, he was already gone. All right. So, he's the he's the only person that died and then
Right.
turned around and like came back and he was there. Now, I mean, he resurrected people like Lazarus, and even when he died, it says like tombs were opened and some Old Testament saints came out. But unfortunately, those people had to die again. Like Jesus never died again once he was resurrected. So Jesus has the scroll that has the 7 seals on it, and so he has to open the scroll. He has to break of the seals, and that is really like what tribulation is all about. Like from Revelation on past that point is about Jesus opening this scroll. And because there's 7 seals on it, then like it's going to take a period of time. Now, most people, they're like, well, when is this going to happen? And even the apostles, like they asked Jesus, well, when is this going to happen? And it's funny because Jesus even threw in a question to them that they didn't ask. You know, they said, when will these things take place? What are the signs of your second coming? And what are the signs of the end of the age of the Gentiles that we're in now? And Jesus even added, he was like, hey, you forgot to ask, what are not the signs that is there? So Jesus said that, you know, there will be people that will mislead you, saying that they are him and that the time is near. Like you'll hear rumors of wars and disturbances, but he said those are not signs. Those are things that have to take place, but they're not signs. So he starts to answer their question with what are the signs? And from where we talked before, you know, I mean, the book of Daniel being like called the preface to the book of Revelation. So Jesus tells them that the signs for us to look for are nations will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. In various places there will be famines and earthquakes. And then he says, but these things are merely the beginning of birth pangs. You and I have never had a kid, but we are familiar with birth pangs. Like they're painful, they're usually mild at first, they increase in severity, and they repeat. They increase in frequency as they repeat. And at the end, it leads to new life. Right?
Yes.
So just those 3 things that Jesus said, let's go ahead. I mean, when he says nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, like you're talking about world wars. Well, World War I, 88% of the world participated in that. In World War II, 95% of the world participated in that. When you talk about, he mentioned famine. So if you just look back through recent history, I mean, even like some industrialized nations, like they've begun to experience food shortages. I mean, look at the last couple of years. Food prices are up. Supplies are starting to go down. Yeah.
Right.
You know, all of these inventories of grocery stores, they're suppliant on this supply. Jesus, the third thing that he said was earthquakes. I mean, you can look at the USGS website and look at the trends for earthquakes worldwide.
Dude.
I mean, there's been a 43% increase of a steady pattern since the 1900s.
It's climate change, though, dude.
It's climate change. That's what it is. So before tribulation can begin, we're given 9 total signs that kind of lets us know that this is getting ready to start. So Jesus gives us the world wars, the famines, and the earthquakes. A couple of weeks ago, we had talked about the church itself experiencing apostasy, which is just the abandonment of their religious beliefs. You know, with the 7th letter to the church, where, you know, he was like, I would rather you be hot or cold instead of lukewarm. Where people go to church, and because they hang out with Christian people and act like Christian people, they think that they're Christian people, and other people think that they are, but in reality, they're not. Mm-hmm. So we have those signs as well. And then in the book of Daniel, the dreams that he interpreted, Daniel said that there would be 10 kings ruling at the end. Okay, so 10 rulers or nations, 10 ruling nations or whatever, and that a covenant would be signed that would allow Israel to come back into the city and to begin their sacrifices again.
That's a sign.
That's a sign.
Okay.
The rapture, so the church, us being removed,
Yeah.
that's also a sign. The last two signs, those come from the book of Ezekiel. So Ezekiel says that the people of Israel, they will be regathered from where they were scattered from, which would make sense because if there's a covenant, then they can regather, they can start to make sacrifices again. And we're also told that a mysterious Old Testament character will return to Israel before the tribulation. Wow. And Malachi says that that would be Elijah. I mean, if you remember Elijah and Elisha, you know, Elijah, it was just the chariots of fire came down and took him. Like, he didn't die, he was escorted away, right, which makes sense because if he's going to come back before the tribulation starts, I mean, this mysterious way that his life ended, you know, gives good evidence for why that happened, because he's going to come back. So we have all of these 9 signs, and really, if we look at those, I can count 5 of them that have already been fulfilled or are in the process of being fulfilled. So really what we're left with is the 10 kings coming to power, the church being removed, so the rapture happening and us being gone, Elijah coming back, and then, of course, the final sign is this covenant itself with Israel, allowing them to start making sacrifices
What
again.
is that? What does that mean? Like how they would sacrifice the goat and stuff like that, or the sheep or whatever?
Yeah. So for them, like they can't enter into the temple. They have the priests that are at the temple. They would go to the priests and have the priests go before God before them. So the priest would go into the interveil, into the tabernacle, and they would, you know, put the blood on the incense altar and make the sacrifices and stuff for them. So a covenant being signed, allowing them to start to do that again in Jerusalem, where the, you know, temple and stuff was in Jesus's time. Like that's the very final thing that will happen for them to be able to do that. And then that kicks off tribulation. That kicks off this 7-year period with a lot of stuff happening. And again, you know, tribulation itself is even broken into 3 parts. We get the first half of it in chapter 6 through 9. We get even though that mid-tribulation point is very brief, again, like chapters 10 through 15 cover this little brief period because there's a lot of things that happen. And then the second half gets covered in chapters 16 through 19.
Okay.
So tribulation starts off, I'm sure you've heard of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Damn, dude. Now we're getting even crazier.
There's only 1 horseman. There's 4 horses, but there's only 1 horseman.
No way, really?
Yeah, it's the same person. So we're talking about the seals, so we go back to the scroll with the 7 seals. So here's what's going to confuse a lot of people is the 7th seal on the scroll is the 7 trumpet judgments.
Okay.
The 7th trumpet judgment are the 7 bowl judgments. 7. Okay. Are you confused yet?
Already.
Yeah. So so you have the 7 seals, but that 7th seal contains the 7 trumpets, and the 7th trumpet contains the 7 bowls.
It's like a Russian nesting doll.
Yeah. So a lot of people, they're like, okay, well, this thing happens, and then this thing happens, and then this thing happens. But in a lot of it, it's a lot of things are continuing in the background as other judgments are continuing to happen. Okay. It's not like there's a start and stop for every single one of them.
Got it.
Like the 144,000 that are set aside, you know, they continue to be, and people that believe like they're martyred, them being martyred, like that continues throughout the whole period, even though it's only mentioned one time. So the very first seal, that's the white horse. And the horse, the white horse, like that just represents like a picture of authority, of ruling authority. Because when Christ comes back, he's on a white horse. So the horse is just the picture of that. And that is so for here, the first seal, that's the arrival of the Antichrist. Okay, he brings threats of war because he just has a bow. He doesn't have an arrow. Like, what good is it to bring a gun to a fight if you don't have any ammo? So he just has a bow. So he's just bringing threats of war, but he's establishing that he does have some authority or political pull, if you will. And then after that, the second horse, the red horse, that is when the war takes place. So that represents a world war. Okay, so the Antichrist, it's granted to take peace from the earth. It says men will slay one another. A great sword is given to him. It's talking about the Antichrist. And what do world wars result in? Obviously, death.
Right.
So then the third seal gets broken. That's represented by a black horse. We're talking about famine and hyperinflation. I mean, we're talking about the effects of this world war that just happened. Okay, right. So I mean, 100% of the world is involved in this. Thinking about if inflation and famine being bad now, like it's going to be exponentially worse then. It's going to lead to global starvation, which is also going to result in death. So you have war resulting in death. You have famine and hyperinflation leading to starvation that results in death. And then the fourth seal, it says it's a pale green horse. And it says, he who sat on it is named Death, and Hades is following him. But you got to remember, death is a condition, and Hades, or hell, is a place. So it says authority is given to them over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword, with famine, pestilence, wild beasts, and unbelievers go to hell as a result of death. So the fourth seal brings whoever's left after these first two, like 1/4 of them are going to be killed from that. Damn. So that's just the first 4 judgments. And they're obviously connected together in a group, which makes sense. We've been talking about numbers. So the number 4 in scripture represents the earth. So these first 4 judgments, they are designed to look like earthly events, not necessarily heavenly judgments.
Wow. Love
it. So then when we get to the 5th seal, it says, again, this is John talking. So he's talking about like underneath the altar, he sees these souls of those who have been slain because of the word. So the focus goes from earth back into heaven. And we know altars are a place of sacrifice. So for there to be one in heaven tells us this is a place of sacrifice. And what he's seeing is he's seeing the souls of believers that died during tribulation. So they're called Tribulation Saints. So you have your Old Testament saints. You have your church saints, which is the period that we live in now. And then you have these people that will be martyred during tribulation. They're called Tribulation Saints.
So the Tribulation Saints, they're ones that obviously were non-believers, right? Because they didn't get taken up. So maybe they like found faith during this. Is that why?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So in chapters 4 and 5, when we're talking about everything in the throne room, it says all of the spirit was in the throne room. So we know none of the spirit is remaining on earth at that time. But then as chapter 5 shifts focus from God the Father and the Spirit to just Jesus, it says the Spirit then returns to the earth. And there's 144,000 that have been set aside. They receive a mark from God that protects them and keeps them safe. And they are the ones that then begin to share the message with people on earth during tribulation. So, interesting fact about those. So this persecution with them, like happens just in the background throughout all of it. Now, when we talk about the 12 tribes of Israel, it's always interesting because Joseph isn't mentioned very often. If you remember, Joseph was the one that had the cool coat. His brothers beat him up. Okay. He's not mentioned very often when you talk about the 12 tribes of Israel. but his two sons are, because Jacob brought them in before he died. So it's always interesting when you're reading through the Old Testament, look for the tribe that is left out. And that kind of tells you a lot about what's happening. So when it describes like 12,000 people from this tribe and this tribe and this tribe, the tribe that gets left out is the tribe of Dan. And the tribe of Dan is the tribe that first exposed Israel to idol worship.
No way.
So it's, as you could say, a coincidence that nobody from their tribe gets listed in this 144,000. Like 12,000 get picked out of every tribe of Israel except for Dan.
Huh.
So with the sixth seal, it says that there's this huge earthquake, that the sun becomes black. It says black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon becomes like blood, and stars from the sky fall. So we know, this is just supernatural stuff that's happening right here.
Yeah.
Like unlike anything we've ever seen before. The stars falling, would be a meteor shower, and the sun not shining, the moon being blood red. I mean, just think of some of the effects on Earth from the sun not shining.
Yes.
More being there.
Yeah.
And so then, then it goes into and it lists all the tribes. So you get your infamous 144,000 of tribulation. And, I had a buddy one time, and he was like, oh, a friend of mine, he told me that, I would be one of those people, a part of the 144,000. And I'm like, oh, interesting. I didn't know that you were Jewish, because those 144,000 are coming from the tribes, and it's going to be Jewish people. So I didn't realize that you were Jewish, but that's cool, man. It's,
Damn.
So again, the tribe of Dan gets left out, and then the seventh seal, and that goes into the 7 trumpet judgments. Now, again, this is still we're still in the first 3.5 years of tribulation, where all of this stuff.
We're not even full blown yet.
Yeah. No. Yeah, wait till mid-tribulation and then the end. So the trumpet judgments, they're split between impacting the physical earth and impacting the physical bodies of humanity that are here. And so the first 3 trumpets, they bring devastation to the earth, or what remains of it, and life gets really, really hard. And then the second 3, they make life just miserable for people that are there. And they're actually called the Woe Judgments, because woe is the Bible's word for eternal condemnation. So these 3 judgments, they're like a preview of eternal judgments. And the reason why they use trumpets is because back then, trumpets were an instrument used for warning. All right. So the first trumpet, so we're on the 7th seal, trumpet 1, it says, hail and fire mixed with blood is thrown to earth. And it says 1/3 of the earth, 1/3 of the trees, and all the green grass is burned up.
An umbrella won't save you with that.
It will not. So I'll give you a preview of where this is going.
Yeah.
Biblically, Israel, think of Israel as the center. And me knowing where Revelation is going, everything is being set up for this battle between Israel and Babylon.
Huh.
So when it says that 1/3 of the earth, 1/3 of the trees, again, it could just be a coincidence, but North and South America make up 1/3 of the landmass on earth, and they're also directly opposite of Jerusalem.
Wow, dude.
So I'm not saying that the 1/3 of the earth that's going to get burned up is North and South America. I'm just saying it's very coincidental that they make up 1/3 of the landmass.
Dude,
and
that's
they're also
crazy.
On the opposite side of the earth of Jerusalem, which is where the final battle is going to be. So we know that whatever this 1/3 is, it doesn't affect Jerusalem and Babylon because they have to be there. That's trumpet 1. Trumpet 2, it says, a great mountain burning with fire is thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood, a third of the sea creatures die, and a third of the ships are destroyed. So also think of these trumpets as like being very similar to the plagues in Egypt. But again, if we talk about going back to birthing pains, like increasing in intensity for that. So as the Nile River turned to blood, here we see this great mountain. And again, that would have been something supernatural because John would have known like what a meteor, volcano, or something looked like. And those also don't turn water into blood. So this supernatural, like great mountain comes and turns all this water to blood. And again, could just be a coincidence, but the Pacific Ocean is a third of the water and is also directly opposite of Jerusalem.
Wow.
So I guess for me, like right here, 2 trumpets in, like North South America, and then affects the Pacific Ocean.
We're in a horrible spot then. We better get out there on the first try.
Well, I mean, hey, we'll be raptured if you're a believer. So we won't
All
be here.
Good.
Anyway, we'll be watching it from the throne room. We won't be here.
All right. Sweet.
So then the third trumpet, it says a star named Wormwood. Well, anytime you talk about like a fallen star that's given a name, fallen stars are angels, fallen angels are demons. So this is a demon named Wormwood. Wormwood means bitter. So this bitter demon falls into a third of the rivers and the springs. So with the first 3 trumpets, you have a third of the land, a third of the salt water, and a third of the fresh water that have all been impacted.
Right, they're gone.
From that. Now the 4th trumpet comes and it says a third of the sun, third of the moon, third of the stars are struck so that they're darkened and they don't shine. So for a 24-hour period, there's just this total 8-hour blackout every single day. That is there. Now, I mean, I live out in the middle of nowhere, so when the power goes out, like it is incredibly creepy out here because of how dark that it is. So when you think about just this total blackout for an 8-hour period, I mean, there's obviously going to be like a fear factor for people.
Oh, chaos.
Like think of this like nuclear winter scenario. I mean, crops would fail, livestock would die, water, what's left of it, would probably freeze. And then it says that these trumpet judgments get suspended to allow for this other warning to come to earth before the 5th, 6th, and 7th trumpets come. And it comes and says like, woe, woe, woe to the earth, like preparing the earth. And we've talked about before, like to repeat something 3 times is to declare it to its maximum. So that's what happens. So now we move into the 5th trumpet, which is our first woe judgment. And this is called demonic scorpions. So what happens is it says that there's this demon that receives the keys to the bottomless pit. Now, under the earth, we've talked before, is Sheol, and that was split into 2 places. One, Hades or hell, and the other was the bosom of Abraham, which is empty now. That's where Old Testament saints went. When Jesus died and he descended into the middle of the earth, he went there because their souls couldn't go into the throne room yet because Christ hadn't come to spiritually die on the cross for us yet. So Christ goes down, ministers to the Old Testament saints, and then when he comes up 3 days later, he brings their souls. He also goes over to Hades and is just like, hey, I'm the dude that you all didn't believe in. So in Hades, there is another portion that is carved out, and that's often called the abyss or the bottomless pit or the deep, whenever you see that in scripture. And that was like a place for demons, like ones that were particularly evil. They would get cast into this place to be confined for a time. So we're told this demon receives the keys to this bottomless pit. And out of the smoke, it says it comes like these locusts on the earth, and powers given to them, like scorpions on the earth. It says that they're told not to hurt the grass or anything green or trees, but only men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They're not permitted to kill anyone. All they can do is torment, and they're given 5 months to just torment. And it says their torment is like a scorpion when it stings a man. And it also says, in those days, men will seek death but not find it. So I guess for me, like, I don't know if it's just like one sting from a scorpion, or if it's just like you just feel that repetitively over and over, and like you just want to die, but you're so debilitated that you don't even have the ability to just like kill yourself. But it says like men will seek death and they won't find it.
I think I've heard people use that phrase too, like I'm talking about end times, like when they're referring to like transhumanism, you know, like putting yourself up in the matrix. Like I saw an article, like you may be able to live to 150 in the metaverse or whatever. And someone used that phrase, but I didn't mean, I've heard that phrase before.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So they won't even be able to kill themselves. And then the 6th trumpet is our second woe judgment. And it says that there's a great army of horsemen, and it gives a number, 200 million. They'll be led by 4 demons who have been prepared for the hour and the day, and they will kill a third of humanity, of what's left.
Damn, a demon army, dude.
Demon army will kill a third of humanity, of what's left.
Oh my God.
And it's at this point that we finally reach like the first 3.5 years of tribulation. Like we finally get to this halfway point.
Okay.
And at this point, I mean, 50% of the population is gone of what's left after the rapture. So 50% of whoever was left here, they're gone. A third of the earth is uninhabitable. A third of the bodies of water, you can't navigate them, and you can't even drink them. And that's not even the worst to come. And so then we take like this break here to talk about this moment in mid-tribulation. And again, even though it's just like this small moment that divides these 3.5 year periods, there's just so much stuff that happens there. So in I'll explain chapter 12 because that's going to be the end of this mid-tribulation point, but that's where the dragon is. So I know like that's the cool part. So I want to explain that.
No, this whole thing's been cool. So, but it add a dragon, it just makes it even cooler. So awesome.
So obviously the dragon is going to be Satan. And when it talks about this woman giving birth, a lot of people think of birth as like a baby.
Yeah.
But that's not the context for it. So the woman that it's referring to, because it talks about the woman and the dragon. So the woman is Israel. Okay. Christ is the Messiah. The dragon is waiting for the Messiah to devour the Messiah. And that's what when Christ was here on earth, Satan, he's like, oh, I'm going to turn his people against him and have them kill him. Like that was his plan. He didn't know that was God's plan. He thought that was his plan.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a period when Jesus is hanging on the cross, and all of a sudden these people are like, they're like, oh, isn't this the guy that was saving people? Like, why doesn't God save him now? Why doesn't he just get himself off the cross? If he's really the Messiah, why wouldn't he do that? And even the Jewish leaders are saying the same thing, which, I mean, doesn't even make sense. Like if the testhood of being the Messiah was being able to overcome the things that he was going through, why would he have gone through any of it? Like even if he had gotten off the cross, like he still would have been a pretty pathetic Messiah.
Yeah.
Like why not stop the scourging? I mean, he was scourged to the point that he was disfigured. It said he looked like something out of a horror movie. You couldn't even look at him and recognize who he was. Like, why didn't he stop it before then? Why is getting off the cross the thing for them? And, like you imagine Satan like sitting back and realizing like with one word, Jesus could have got off the cross, but he's not getting off the cross. And so then all of a sudden, Satan's like, maybe I overplayed my hand a little bit here. What's happening? So he starts moving through the crowd and tempting the crowd, just like he tempted Christ for 40 days. He's trying to tempt Jesus to get off the cross because nothing held Jesus there. Jesus held himself there.
Yeah.
At 3 p.m., he said, Father, I command my spirit into your hand. Like he laid down his own life. He had no sin. So if the wages of sin is death, if you have no sin, ergo you have no death. So Christ laid down his life, commanded his spirit out of him, but Satan realized, oh, I may have made a mistake here, and starts trying to tempt the crowds into what's happening. So that's why it says like he's waiting to devour him. Well, when you get into the 10 spikes and then, or the 10 horns, and then 3 of them being gone and another horn comes up, that goes back to the book of Daniel. So the 10 horns represent those 10 world leaders that we talked about that have to come into play.
Okay.
The book of Daniel tells us at some point, which this is the point mid-tribulation, the Antichrist will rise up, overthrow 3 of them, like will kill 3 of them, to take his stake as a position of authority, and then the other 7 will be rulers with him. But you still have the 10 heads and you still have the 10 crowns because you still have 10 territories. It's just now you only have 7 rulers, and then you have the main ruler, which is the Antichrist. So that's all that's happening there with the dragon and stuff. I told you it was going to be anticlimactic.
Oh, dude, it's still crazy, dude.
For
So
sure.
the Antichrist, he would be in charge of. He's in charge of all of the 10, or no? Is that what you're saying, or no?
No. So he has political power, but it's at this mid-tribulation point that he overthrows 3 of them.
Okay.
Rises to power himself, and the remaining 7 just kind of follow and lead as like his top people.
Interesting. Got it.
So, Cliff Note version of mid-tribulation, there's a temple in Israel. There's people worshiping there. So that suggests to us that God has been sparing Israel from all of these disasters that have been happening. And now there's 2 prophets that have been at the temple. They've been prophesying for the last 3.5 years. They have supernatural powers because they've been able to prevent their enemies from harming them. They are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands before the Lord that the book of Zechariah talks about. Their ministry has a worldwide impact. They're hated by most people because the world assumes that all the bad stuff is happening because of them. But God had appointed them to warn the world during this first 3.5 year period. And so as they finish their testimony at this mid-tribulation point, God allows them to be killed by the beast, which we know is the Antichrist. And at that point, it's the Antichrist being indwelled by Satan that kills them. So after they're killed, their bodies actually remain visible in the city for 3 days. Everybody celebrates their death. They're super happy about it. But then we're told after 3.5 days, the breath of life comes back into them. They stand up on their feet. They hear a voice from heaven that says, come up here. And then they are taken away in a cloud. All right. So we talked about the kingdoms that are happening. Now, the second part of chapter 12. Right now, even to this day, you can look at the book of Job. Satan and his demons, they have access to heaven. Because in the book of Job, when Christ says, or when God, calls everybody and asks Satan, he's like, hey, what have you been up to? Like he didn't know. But that's taking place in heaven. So at this point, at this mid-tribulation point, the second part of chapter 12, it talks about the archangel Michael and the other angels, like they cast Satan and his followers out of heaven. So they lose access to heaven at that point. Now, Satan still thinks that he can win because he has access to heaven. So he has this false perception of being able to win. And the reason why God hasn't cast him out before then is because Satan, he gets big mad and starts freaking out when he gets cast out. And that's like, we see the events of that in the next 3.5 years.
Okay.
So he gets cast out from heaven, and that's when he just like freaks out, thinks that he, is like, okay, well, I'm going to end up losing this. So what am I going to do? So at this point, there's also other things happening. Like in the second 3.5 years, there's not going to be any new believers. Like at this point, things are going to be happening where it's like you're either team God or you're team Antichrist. Like which one
right.
are you going to be? Satan mimics God by developing his own counterfeit mark. Remember, God had put a mark on those 144,000. And so this counterfeit mark is the 666. So by adding up the letters in a person's Hebrew name, you can arrive at a single value. So for example, if we add the Hebrew letters...
Say that again. Say that again real quick.
If you add up the letters in a person's Hebrew name, you can arrive at a single value. Okay. So for example, if we take Jesus the Messiah, you would arrive at 749. Now again, that only works like in their Hebrew. So again, the number 6 in the Bible is a number for fallen or sinful man. So in Hebrew writing, to double means more and to triple means most. So 666 is the most or most sinful man.
Got it.
But also the Hebrew name for this person will equal 666. Just like the 749 equals Jesus the Messiah. Okay.
Dang, dude.
And he's not done being a copycat. He raises up another person to display these supernatural powers and signs called the false prophet. So now Satan has his false mark to mimic God's mark, and now he has his own counterfeit trinity. He has Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet.
Wow.
And then this is where the world gets put into a few different camps. So there's going to be a principal group of believers, both Jews and Gentiles. The Jewish people will be in Batra or Petra. If you look that up, it looks like something out of Indiana Jones. It's pretty cool. So the Jews will be in Petra, and they're not going to face any persecution. God's going to protect them in Petra. You can you can see what that looks like. It's really awesome. The Gentiles, okay, cool. The Gentiles who are believers, they will face persecution. So you have, there it is. So that's Petra or Batra, and that's where the believing Jewish people, God will protect them and hold them there. They will not suffer persecution for the remaining 3.5 years.
Okay.
But the Gentile people will. Believers will suffer persecution. So you have that. You have people that will take the mark. You have the 144,000 Jewish evangelists. They are 100% martyred. So they do not survive tribulation. And at this point, because there's not going to be any new believers, so at this point, their souls are the ones that are in the throne room under the altar that John saw earlier. You get an angel that comes and he preaches the entire gospel, kind of like a final altar call to everybody. There's a second angel that comes, announces Babylon as the enemy kingdom. And then there's a third angel that just declares that anyone that doesn't heed the call to believe in the gospel and takes the mark, that they will be tormented forever. And we learn believers who live to the end of tribulation, so people that are alive, believe it or not, people that survive the second half of tribulation who are believers, which will be like both the Jewish people that are in Petra, and then any of the Gentiles that survive, that they will enter into the millennial kingdom in their natural bodies. So We know that part of our eternal reward during the millennial kingdom is we will have some type of government position. Now, not like government we have now. We're talking about like Christ's government. So it's going to
Oh,
be
awesome.
opposite
Yeah.
of government we have now.
Yeah.
So since they're entering in their natural bodies, they won't have a government position, so to speak. And then finally, we are told that angels will reap believers through martyrdom. And when you think about reaping something, I mean, the Grim Reaper. I mean, you've seen the big hook, and when you're going through fields and you're reaping stuff, I mean, you're picking it up in bundles and bushes. So it just speaks to the level of martyrdom that happens during this. And so then that ends mid-tribulation. So that's a lot of stuff that happens.
That was everything. That was tons.
In this like period that just separates these 2 years. And so then you get your seventh trumpet, which starts your 7 bowl judgments. So at the sound of the 7th trumpet, then these bowl judgments, these are the final wrath of God. These bowl judgments, they're poured out on the earth. So the first bowl, it says that God takes away man's physical comfort with loathsome sores. So like just these evil, wicked, like disruption of your flesh in unimaginable ways. And then the second bowl, it says that God puts an end to all sea life by making all the seas turn to blood. So besides like the uncountable number of dead and rotting fish, the blood itself would begin to congeal, if you think about it, would become putrid, would shut down the water cycle, so there's not going to be any rain. Then it says the fresh water also turns to blood. And these blood judgments, they're a repayment for the world pouring out the blood of the saints. And really, I mean, just after those first 3 bowls, I mean, the end is within days because I mean, you can't live many days without water.
Right.
So then the 4th bowl judgment, it says the sun becomes increasingly hot to the point that it burns men and burns the earth. So the people that are here, except for the ones being spared in Petra, like you have stores, there's no water. The earth probably stinks really bad from all of the congealed blood and dead fish. And now everything is like scorching hot. And then the 5th bowl judgment, it says the earth is cast into darkness, and that the darkness is so intense that it causes unbearable pain. And when you think about like how does darkness lead to pain, it's not just meaning like a lack of physical light, but also spiritual light. You know, when Jesus was on the cross from 12 to 3, the entire earth experienced darkness. And the symbolism behind that was God had removed his presence from the sun. Now, I mean, if you're wondering like how God can be separated from God, raise your hand, join the club. I mean, I think on a good day, some people would probably struggle to explain how the Trinity works, let alone how God can be separated from God. But we're just told that that's what happens.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's what, even for a non-believer, like you're extended common grace. So imagine just like no hope whatsoever. Like not just the physical darkness, but the spiritual darkness as well. Like not even feeling like you had anything to hope for. So those are all done. There's only 2 judgments left, and they really seem insignificant compared to everything else that is happening. The first of those 2, we call this the climax of the War of Armageddon, and it has multiple stages.
Oh my God, the war's still going on?
The War of Armageddon.
Who's even fighting in this thing?
It's not just a single military engagement. It's a series of events over weeks.
Oh my gosh, dude.
So because the 6th bowl judgment is just that the Euphrates River dries up.
Okay.
That doesn't really sound like a judgment. The point of it is to make a way for the Antichrist and the 7 kings that are left for them to travel to head towards where the final battle place is going to be.
Oh my God, a final battle. Holy.
So they are going to gather their forces in this place, and the Hebrew name for that is Har Megiddo. Now, the word Har in Hebrew is just a hill or a mountain, and
Okay.
Megiddo is the name of the city. So its literal translation is Hill of Megiddo. But because we speak English and we like to butcher stuff, instead of calling it Harmageddon, we arrive at Armageddon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
yeah, the whole time we've been just saying like a hill of Magetto, but we call it Armageddon
That's
because
funny,
that's just what we
dude.
do. So Satan and his followers, knowing their time is short, they're determined to kill Christ at the moment of his return. So they gather there because they're like, this is where he's going to come, and when he gets here, we're going to kill him. In this war of Armageddon, like it unfolds throughout like these 5 different stages. But then finally, we get the 7th bowl, and it says it's poured into the air, which results in an earthquake that produces a unique destruction unlike any earthquake ever. So the damage of this earthquake is going to be on par with the flood that happened, only without water, obviously, because there's none
Right.
left. So it
Yeah.
says like mountains are gone, islands are gone, continents are ripped apart, and it says the great city, Babylon, is destroyed. There's the removal of all Gentile nations, 100-pound rock, 100-pound rocks fall to earth.
Holy
And so,
crap.
as the final judgment comes, it says there's a voice from the temple that says it's done, which just means that it's accomplished in Greek. All right. So, like, all of the seals have been broken, all of the judgments have happened. The thing that's getting ready to happen next is Christ is going to return. And I just want to like touch on like why Babylon has to be the bad guy city. Well, that's where the Garden of Eden was. Okay, that's where Satan's jealousy over creation of man and woman led him to attack Adam to bring sin into the world. That's the source of idolatry. That's where the Tower of Babel was, that started idolatry. Like the tower was the first false religion, the first Gentile kingdom to conquer the nation of Israel and the city of Jerusalem were the Babylonians. That's where the Antichrist takes up his seat of power during tribulation. The enemy's counterfeit religion began in the garden. It took shape at Babel and eventually gave birth to, like it says, uncountable numbers of children. I mean, look today at the smorgasbord of religions, of religious choices that the enemy has proliferated
Right.
with lies.
Dude, that like explains so much, like about like our we always talk about like the ancient Babylon religion and like secret
Mhm.
societies, and so when you say this and like the in Revelation, does it mean like current day, like what Iraq or whatever?
Yeah,
Wow, dude,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Mesopotamia area.
damn,
Yeah,
crazy,
absolutely,
dude. That just is
absolutely.
crazy.
Yeah, and so all of those false religions, like that just plays into Satan's advantage because it camouflages the truth, which we're always trying to find out what that is, but it camouflages it, and then it perpetuates the myth that there are many roads to heaven instead of just one. So, yeah, at this point in Revelation, there's just the 2 cities that are standing with all the bowl judgments and stuff gone. So the only thing is just the final battle, and that's 19 through 22 in Revelation, man.
So this battle, like so when and so the after the battle ends, that's when we have that like 1,000 year where I'm gonna get to be like a secretary in the government.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hell yeah.
So it says Christ comes back and he's on a white horse with a name that nobody knows. So even the name that we call him today, that's not going to be his name.
Okay.
And it talks about, describes the people that are coming with him, the army that's with him. And I'll just let you know, we are that army that is coming back with him. But it's funny we're called an army because we don't do any fighting.
Okay.
So we come back, and the first place that Christ goes is not to Jerusalem. He goes to Bozrah to be able to save the Jewish people that are there, and then he heads to Jerusalem. That's why he is described as having blood on his robes, because he just defeated the enemy there before coming into Jerusalem. And then like that battle is super short because it says he defeats the enemy with his word. And that's it. The people that die, it said that, I mean, like their corpses and stuff just split open, and it's so quick and violent that the blood released, it says it fills the Kidron Valley flowing 200 miles.
Wow. Man.
Like that's just like it's done. And it leaves a huge mess, but God has a way to clean it up. Like the birds are going to fly in and feast off of all of the dead people. There's a 75-day interval to kind of like clean up the earth and get everything ready before this final period. Satan is cast into the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. And we had talked about, entering into this millennial kingdom, and you had, I mean, there's still Jews and Gentiles that are believers that are in their natural sinful body.
Yeah.
So without Satan and any of his demons to help, like sin doesn't get a root and grow. Like there's still sin, and that's where we come in, because we like have righteous judgment over sin and things like that. But sin doesn't get a root like it does today, because Satan isn't here. So all judgment is righteous, so to speak, upon people. And so then that happens for 1,000 years. And then I guess just for time's sake, for the super short version of it. So for us, our judgment period is more of a period. It's not going to be a judgment period for like unbelievers.
Okay.
So after this 1,000-year period, the Antichrist and the false prophet, they are already in the lake of fire. Satan is released. He has this period where once again he tries to like muster up this army for one last attack. They are all just mopped out by fire. And it's done. Satan is judged, cast into the lake of fire. And then it says that the books are present and open. I don't know if the books are every bad thing that any unbeliever's ever done. If it's the law that Moses wrote, because by definition, if you broke one law, then like that's all it's got to be, is just one law.
Yeah.
As an unbeliever, and then you're judged by God. But it says in this moment when this happens, it says this earth flees. And the word that is used for flee is the same one that Mark used to pretty much describe, like, imagine you were naked in a field and a bunch of people walked into the field and you were like, oh, I wasn't expecting these people. And you took off running away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it says, that's how fast this earth flees. So we're just like occupying this space for this judgment. It doesn't say, again, like, I don't know if it's like this person comes forward and everything is red, or if everybody is there. And it's just as they start reading the law, because everybody's familiar with the 10 Commandments, but I mean, they had 311 laws.
Oh.
So outside of the popular 10 Commandments, like there's still 301 other laws that are out there. So if you break one of them, then that's all that it would really need. So I don't know, how long that period would take. I mean, we're really not going to care.
Right.
Anyway, and then it says there's a new heaven and a new earth for us. There's not going to be any sun. There's not a sun that's there, because the sun and the moon and the stars for us now, like they're used to tell time and count seasons,
right,
and stuff like that. It says God's going to be the light for us in the temple. There's not going to be any darkness. We will count months, because it says there's a river that flows out of the middle of the city. And the tree of life, grows like on both sides of the river, and each month it produces a new fruit. And so we will like have a new fruit each month. So we'll be able to do that. And I know somebody's going to be like, well, if we can count the months, then can't we count a year? Well, this is going to be for an eternity. So you're not really going to care. But we're also told that there are 12 gates into the New Jerusalem. And that's where the pearly gates come from, because it says each gate is made of a single pearl. So there's no pearly gates in heaven. The pearly gates are in the New Jerusalem. And those are there, again, as a way for us to remember. So each of the 12 gates is for the 12 tribes of Israel. And then the city of Jerusalem is built on 12 different layers, and those represent the 12 apostles. We have the fruit that we can do. And so all of that, like, that's for us to remember that life comes from God. Because, if we were still in the Garden of Eden today, let's just say that, Adam didn't sin and we're still in the Garden of Eden today. I mean, we would understand God's goodness to an extent, but I mean, how can you really understand love if you don't understand hate? How can you understand light if you haven't experienced darkness? How can you understand righteous judgment if you don't have an understanding of a broken and fallen world?
Right.
So since this is going to be eternity for us, then we have these things set in place so that we will be able to remember those.
That makes sense.
As we live in eternity. Yeah.
Because if you didn't know, but like you said, you wouldn't like cherish it or honor it or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And then, that's kind of it. And then at the end of it, John puts a thing in there that just says, pretty much, don't add anything to this book or take anything away from it.
No,
meaning
really,
meaning the whole Bible. So,
wow, dude. Do you think so? One question that someone asked in the chat was, do you think the Antichrist has been born yet, or is like here, or do you not delve too much into the? I know that's like, I don't know if that's an area that you think about or whatever.
I guess I mean, yeah, I guess I wonder about that. Like, how close are we? I've been doing a study on Matthew 27 and 28 to actually have some of those up on my podcast I started because of you, because of your inspiration.
Oh, good.
And so we can back into and know that Christ died on April 10th of 27 AD. So the 2000 year anniversary for Christ's death will be, I think, April 22nd of 2027. Because that is based on a lunar calendar.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know if anything special is going to happen that year.
Yeah.
2000 year anniversary of that. So I don't know if anything crazy is going to happen that year or not. I don't like make any speculation for that.
Right.
So, yeah,
but that's very interesting.
I don't know if that person's born already, if they're already like in some kind of political power or affiliation or what it is. I guess for me, like, I just take courage in knowing that I am not going to be here when any of this stuff happens. So I like to understand it because it gives me a sense of urgency to try to share the message with as many people as I can.
Yeah.
Because I don't want them, like, especially that second 3.5 years, like, that's kind of a preview of what people are going to experience for all eternity, without coming to know Christ. And I don't, like, you can't hate anybody enough to want them to have to experience that for eternity.
Yeah.
So, I don't, like the thief on the cross. He was making fun of Jesus 1 second, and then the next, he was declaring that he was Messiah. And I think that's the cool thing for all of us is when we come to Christ, man, like, he doesn't be like, oh, well, 5 seconds ago, like, you were talking smack about me.
Yeah.
Or anything like that. Like, it is what it is. Like, he knows your repentant heart, and goes from there. So, just trying to share this with everybody and give a sense of urgency to them. But yeah, I mean, I often wonder, like, man, is this person already like in a political position now? Are they born yet? Like, I think it's human nature to be curious about that stuff.
Well, and like what also like brought me back to like Christianity was reading all this stuff about these Babylon religions and how much value they clearly worship, like they don't worship the Bible, but they use this information and act a different way or whatever not the opposite technically like all the time, but that like, cause clearly they believe in the opposite. Their goal is pushing the unbiblical things or unholy things. And so it would not be surprising at all that if they, because they're always trying to they're trying to like force the prophecy at hand, at least in my opinion. And
Yeah.
so it would not surprise me at all that they have identified possibilities of these characters through Kabbalah, through like gematria or whatever tactics they use, birth times. And yeah. But
Yeah. I mean, it's wild. I mean, you like if you understand just how much evil and stuff there is in the world and just how much like some of these people like manipulation and stuff like that, it's just I think I heard somebody say once like there can't be this much evil without like the equal or
yes,
greater good
right.
than what the amount of evil is that's here. I mean, I think we talked last time, like if you look up where the Pope preaches from in the Vatican, like it looks like he's standing in a snake's mouth, with the fangs hanging down. And I mean, we all know what the serpent represents biblically. Right. So it's just, like you look at some of that stuff and it's like, how do people just like make excuses for it or not see it? Like, how do you not understand just how like dark some of this stuff is it just because of their title or that they're a quote unquote religious or spiritual person? Like that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
I mean, Cain and Abel, like Adam and Eve's first kids, like you would think if anybody was going to be like love God more than anybody, it would be Adam and Eve's kids. Like they got to hear from mom and dad, like all the cool stuff that God could do. But yet Cain looked at his, Satan thought that Cain was going to be the one to crush his head from the judgments that happened. So he started tempting him. Cain is technically your very first unbeliever and just felt like his relationship with God was a give and take thing. Like, okay, I'll bring you this sacrifice and you just take care of me. But he didn't bring a sin sacrifice because he just thought the relationship was an exchange and then got jealous and then murdered his brother. Mm-hmm. So, ever since from then, like, Satan's end game is just to, delude the truth and, try to get everybody to believe in literally anything except the gospel message. Like, it doesn't matter how many religions there are or what people do or what they believe in, as long as they're not believing in the gospel, then, he's fine with that.
So I got two other. I don't want to keep. We'll finish in like 10 minutes. So I got two questions. So
okay,
the one question was, I don't know if you watch. So I did a show on the Jesuits, like all these shows and about the symbolism. So like the kind of like how you're saying what the Pope stands in the snake thing, like how the eagle is Jupiter's mascot, and like a lot of churches they sit on eagle lecterns, which is weird. And why an eagle? Like it doesn't matter what denomination. I looked like there's tons, but then also was in Jeremiah it said like you shall not depict graven images. Do you know that Bible verse?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What does that Bible verse mean?
So, talking about the graven images, like when Moses was on Mount Sinai and he's getting the law, the people, they created this golden cow not to start a new religion, but they just wanted to have an image. Like they wanted to have something tangible to be able to worship. Right. Like they still believed in God. They knew that he had brought them out of Egypt, but Moses was gone. And that was like their tangible, like that was their person. And so they just like, because that's what they were used to in Egypt, because Egypt always had all of these tangible symbols and things that you could, visually look at and see and be able to worship. And so that's what they wanted to revert back to. They did a lot of things. Like, God didn't want them to have any kings. He wanted to be their king. They were the ones that wanted kings, and look at how that turned out for them. So them wanting to not just embrace God and trust him and follow him, but it was more like, okay, well, we understand this, but we're also used to these things. So we would like to also like just keep those because that's what we're comfortable with.
Okay. So like the point, so like, how people wear Jesus on the like necklaces on the cross, that's like forbidden in the Bible, right?
Well, I think that depends on, again, examining the heart for that. People that wear like a cross as a necklace, are they like kissing it and worshiping it and like holding it every time they pray, where it's like that's the thing that they're actually worshiping?
I see.
instead of just God? Or is it, I have this thing, it's a reminder for me for the sacrifice he made for me. Maybe somebody will ask me about it, and I'll have an opportunity to minister to them. So, obviously it's going to be different depending on the person. But again, at the end of the day, it's just more of where their heart is and what their intent is behind it.
Interesting. That was a great explanation, dude. That helped, because that book that Jesuit book I read, that author talked about that like the whole time, like how he said that if you depict these images, God says something in another verse, like, or not God, I don't know if it was God, if it's in the Bible or if it's like an early church father, but they say you'll be worshiping something else, not God. And that's why he said that the early church fathers said, do not, like in the 1st and 2nd century, do not depict any images because of that. And then the point he was making was like how like the Catholic Church, all those statues in Italy and stuff like that, those statues were made during pagan Rome. And like the Queen of Heaven is Isis or Ishtar. And then Mary, they just said, nope, this is Mary now. And and then they even started calling her the Queen of Heaven, which was the pagan phrase for Ishtar or Isis.
Yeah. Like the church that we go to, like there's no crosses hanging up anywhere. There's no 10 Commandments hanging up anywhere. Which is crazy because I'm not Catholic, but for a point in time, like I went to a Catholic school, and like they got crucifix hanging up everywhere and statues of Mary and stuff like that. And I was listening to a guy one time, he was talking about the crucifixion process, and he was like, first of all, the crucifix, like they were only maybe 6 or 7 feet off the ground, because like it didn't benefit the Romans to have to lift anybody higher off the ground than what was needed to kill them. He goes, and also they didn't crucify anybody with their clothes on. He goes, but no church wants to put a naked Jesus up in their church. So, they're just using the symbolism and the things that is beneficial to them, and not, kind of not sticking with the biblical stuff. So again, just somebody examining their heart. Are you getting a cross tattoo so that you can, worship the tattoo that's on your body, or are you getting it like as a remembrance, or,
That's a good answer, dude.
Something that stays with you. Yeah.
That's a good. All right. And then my last question. So you kind of already answered it. So I think I've like after reading all this time and like looking at all forms of government, and my conclusion I came to was that like possibly the monarchy was the best form of government for the people. And so I got in like a debate with my good friend who's you should talk to him, John from We've Read the Documents. Have you?
Okay.
I'll send you guys. You would love. You guys would have a good conversation. But John, he also agreed with me. He's a really smart guy, and he agreed with me. And then he said he just brought up what you brought up when I talked about it recently. He said it's not, because he went at the time when he agreed. He said, yeah, it's like biblical to have a king, and then he brought up that story. I forget who was the king was it in Jerusalem that they said we want a king like the pagan people have, and God then set the Babylonians, and they
Well, so it was the Israelites. Like
Israelites.
once they got into the promised land, then it was like, ooh, we want a ruler, and God is kind of like, okay, I'll volunteer. Like I'm supposed to be your ruler, but they wanted again like a tangible person to be able to look at. Like they had Moses, they had Joshua. Like they wanted somebody that could tell them what to do, and so finally, God raised up a king for them. And then, really after Solomon, I mean, Solomon asked to be the wisest king. Like that was the thing that he wanted, and God had granted him that. And where Solomon messed up is he allowed one of his wives to start bringing in like
Jezebel.
her pagan, yes, to start bringing in like her pagan stuff or whatever. And that was like, again, going back to the Garden of Eden, it was just like, you can do all of this stuff, just don't do this one thing. And that was that one thing. And that's really when, like from a king standpoint, that things started to go downhill. Like you had significantly more evil kings than you did good kings. I mean, the book of Judges is just like a big circle. Like God's people don't do what they tell him to do. So then they get captured or suppressed by a group of people. They, woe is me, return back to God. God raises somebody up to save them and to rule over them. And then that lasts for a little bit. And then eventually, like you have somebody else come into power. And I mean, it just like keeps going around in a circle for them, all because they wanted to have a king.
Well, and so then, that's a great answer and gives me some hope that because he would give a king.
Yeah. And then eventually, from the Babylonian Empire, I mean, that's the last time we see the Ark of the Covenant. The cherubim that are in the throne room in chapter 4 of Revelation, the last time we saw them was in the book of Ezekiel when they go into Solomon's temple and remove the Ark of the Covenant before the Babylonians come into it. So it's kind of ironic that before the age of the Gentile begins, the Ark of the Covenant gets removed.
Yeah.
And then we don't see we don't see them again until, at this tribulation point when the age of the Gentiles is coming to an end.
Interesting. And then the guy, he's Plato. He had a question. I don't know what this means, but he wanted me to ask you. He said it was wondering why Lucifer was said to be called Samael before his fall.
That is an excellent question. As I say, when I don't know the answer.
And someone else said that, Josh said that's an awesome effing question.
That is an awesome
probably
question.
A hard one to answer.
Yeah, so, I'll have to look into that. I haven't been asked that before. That's an awesome question.
All right. Well, so sorry we played it, but I know Brandon will find the answer for us.
I will.
Well, dude, so this was an amazing episode. You'll have to tell me another topic that I can learn more Bible stuff with you. But where can everyone find you, listen to you? You started a podcast, which is awesome.
I did. Due to your encouragement, I started one. Yeah. The podcast is called Just One Man. So the number one, so just, and then the number one man all together. And really the idea behind that is just taking, these Sunday school stories that we all grew up with, but then like nobody ever taught us anything more than that. And let's just face it. I mean, I was lazy, so I just took them for face value and never jumped into them. So the point of that is to take, some popular Sunday school lessons and really dive into them to understand, like, why do we need to know that? Why does it matter? So I've got 7 episodes out right now. I did a 3-part series on creation. So it covers Genesis.
Damn. That'll be our next show. Awesome.
Genesis 1 and 2. And then I was going to jump into like the fall of man, but since Easter's coming up, I'm also doing a study on Matthew chapter 27 and 28. So I just went ahead and started with that. So I have 4 episodes up of that, talking about Jesus's final hours, going through there. So, talks about Judas, Christ's time on the cross, what that meant, what it represented, how we know that he died on a Thursday and not a Friday. Going through that. So I'll record the last episode of it next week, but the good stuff for those is up.
Oh, dude, I'm so proud of you for starting the show, dude. You put so much work in this, so you need to share it, like your wealth of knowledge, dude, because most are like me and should read the Bible and don't. It's written so I can't read it at night because I don't know what the heck is it saying. So awesome, dude. So I'll put your show link in the show notes and your Twitter handles and whatever. And dude, it was an awesome. People loved it. So that was a great show, dude. So thank you.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
We're doing the creation next. So we'll talk soon. You have a good night. Thanks for listening, everybody. And we'll see each other soon, I'm sure. All right, dude. Peace.